Kita akan mempelajari salah satu distribution yang penting ya, selain distribusi normal, kemudian distribusi T, ya. Sebenarnya masih ada lagi distribusi F ya, tapi ada sebuah distribusi yang penting yaitu Weibull distribution ya. Nah, ini adalah grafik-grafiknya. Tapi sebelum kita mempelajari Weibull distribution ya, ada beberapa hal penting ya. Yang pertama adalah hazard rate ya, yang perlu dipelajari. Kemudian yang berikutnya adalah ini PMF, PDF, GDF ya, itu penting. Ya, yang pertama PMF itu probability mass function ya. Terus PDF itu probability density function. Terus yang berikutnya adalah cumulative distribution function ya. Kita harus membedakan ini dengan jelas ya sebelum kita mempelajari Weibull distribution ya. Oke. Tentang 3 hal ini yaitu PMF, PDF, dan CDF itu sering ketiga-tiganya ini dinamakan dengan PDF ya. Tapi untuk mempelajari Weibull, ya, fungsi Weibull, kita harus bisa mengklarifikasi ketiga jenis definisi ini dengan baik dan benar ya. Oke ya, sekarang PMF dan PDF itu sebenarnya sama ya, tetapi yang membedakan adalah fungsi probabilitasnya ya. Yang satu adalah discrete ya, yang satunya continuous ya. Untuk memahami discrete function dan continuous function, dimohon melihat video beberapa waktu yang lalu ya tentang kuliah ini ya. Nah, kalau jumlahnya ya, jumlah dari PMF maupun PDF itu namanya adalah cumulative distribution function ya, atau jumlah dari sebelah kiri kalau dari grafik ya. Sebenarnya kita sudah menerapkan hal itu ya saat kita membicarakan distribusi normal maupun distribusi T sebelumnya. Oke, mungkin ada gambaran ya. Ini adalah fungsi discrete ya. Misalnya jika kita punya dadu, kemudian kalau kita lempar, tentu kemungkinan keluar angka 1 adalah 1/6 ya. Atau 1/6 itu berapa? Ya, kalau dihitung 1/6 mungkin sama dengan 0, kalau sepertiga 0,33 berarti 0, kalau kita bagi ya 1 bagi 6 ini biar karena ini angkanya dalam bentuk desimal ya. Ya. 1 bagi 6 0,167 ya. Oke, ini hampir 0,2 ya. Ini adalah 0,167 ya, atau 1/6. Kemungkinan keluar mata 1. Kalau kemungkinan keluar mata 2, maka 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6 ya, gitu. Itu adalah PMF karena ini discrete ya, bukan fungsi continuous. Ciri-ciri yang mudah dari fungsi diskrit adalah bahwa dia tidak bisa di antara nilainya sudah tertentu ya, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gitu. Kita tidak bisa di tengahnya, misalnya 1,5 enggak ada ya. Atau ini biasanya datanya disebut digital ya. Jadi dia angka-angka yang sudah tetap ya. Kalau yang continuous itu dia diskrit. Apa itu? Analog ya, angkanya bisa 1,5, 2,5 gitu. Dan di antara 2,5 nanti bisa 2,25 dan seterusnya ya. Selalu ada di antaranya itu fungsi continuous. Maka jelas untuk mata dadu yang keluar itu tentu fungsinya diskrit. Ya. Oke, itu yang pertama. Kemudian kemungkinannya adalah 1/6 masing-masing atau 0,167 ya. Kalau cumulative probability ya pertama adalah keluar angka 1 atau 1/6 atau 0,167. Kemudian kalau 2 di sini sumbu X-nya artinya 1 dan 2 ya di grafik PMF. Ya, 1 dan 2 adalah maka menjadi 2/6 atau 1/3 atau 0,333 gitu ya ini. Demikian juga sampai ke 3 ya maka ya 3/6 atau setengah ya kan. Ini adalah setengah di sini 3. CDF-nya dari 3 artinya kemungkinan 1, 2, 3 ya. Kemudian kalau 4 ya sampai di sini maka luasnya adalah 2/3. 2/3 tentu 0,667 ya atau ini ya. Ya, yang warna hijau ini. Jadi 1 sampai 4 maka kita melihatnya di CDF adalah 0,667 gitu ya. Artinya kemungkinan sama dengan kemungkinan keluar angka di dadu ya, 4 atau kurang ya, lebih kecil sama dengan 4. Artinya sama dengan probabilitas 1, probabilitas keluar mata dadu 2 ditambah probabilitas keluar dadu angka 3 dan ditambah probabilitas keluar dadu angka 4. Itu adalah CDF-nya dari PMF. Sedikit ulasan yang menarik ya. Kalau karena suatu hal ya maka tidak mungkin keluar mungkin bentuknya yang sedemikian ya. Sehingga tidak memungkinkan keluar angka 3 dan 4 ya. Maka probabilitas ya keluar angka 1 adalah 1/4, probabilitas keluar angka 2 1/4, probabilitas keluar angka 5 juga 1/4, probabilitas keluar angka 6 1/4. Ya, kita lihat CDF-nya, cumulative probability-nya ya. Keluar angka 1 1/4, keluar angka 2 atau kurang, ya berarti 1 dan 2 adalah setengah tentu saja karena 1/4 ditambah 1/4 ya. Kemudian 3 atau kurang tetap setengah karena 3 nggak mungkin keluar, berarti kan kurvanya di sini menjadi horizontal ya. Ya, 3 dan 4 dia menjadi horizontal ya. Tetap setengah kemungkinannya. Keluar 4 atau kurang, keluar 3 atau kurang, keluar 2 kalau kurang atau kurang. Kemungkinannya tetap setengah atau di sini gradiennya sama dengan 0 ya. Antara 2, 3, 4 garisnya horizontal. Oke, atau 5 atau kurang berarti 3/4 ya, 0,75 dan 6 kemungkinannya 100% ya, 6 atau kurang. Ini 1 ini kan 100%. Oke, selalu ya, CDF hasil akhirnya selalu dia 1 luasnya. Oke, ya itu adalah untuk yang discrete. Kalau untuk fungsi kontinu, ya ini dulu waktu kita membuat distribusi normal, ya ini rata-rata tinggi wanita, ya, bukan di Indonesia ini, karena 165 rata-ratanya, agak tinggi mungkin di ya, rata-rata tinggi wanita mahasiswa ya, katakanlah mahasiswa di Australia 165 rata-ratanya di sini, dan dia terdistribusi normal ya. Mudah-mudahan masih ingat tentang distribusi normal. Ya, ini fungsinya pasti kontinu ya, karena antara 165, 140, nanti ada 150, antara 150 ada 165, nanti tengahnya selalu ada nilai tengahnya. Fungsi seperti itu adalah fungsi-fungsi yang kontinus ya. Kemudian ini adalah CDF-nya atau cumulative distribution function ya. Oke, ya, bagaimana ya kita membuat kurva CDF-nya dari PDF ya, tentu saja ya kita menghitung luasannya kan, ini sama dengan ya kalau ininya 111 ya. Tetapi untuk fungsi ini berbeda, sedikit berbeda, maka kita untuk mendapatkan grafik CDF-nya adalah kita menghitung luasan di bawah kurva ya. Tentu saja luasan di bawah kurva di bawah 190 adalah 1% ya, 100% atau 1. Di di min-nya rata-ratanya 165 karena kurva normal simetris ya terhadap densitasnya, maka harusnya di sini adalah setengah ya. CDF-nya, luas kurva ini adalah separuh di kiri, separuh di kanan. Sehingga kalau 165 ke atas ditarik ke sini, ya ini harusnya nilainya setengah ya. Oke, nanti kita praktekkan ya dengan Excel tentang CDF dan PDF untuk distribusi normal ya, salah satunya. Kita belum ke Weibull dulu, kita masih ke distribusi normal. Untuk mendapatkan luas di bawah kurva ya tentu kita menggunakan konsep integral ya kan. Integral adalah luas daerah di bawah kurva antara A dan B. Ya. Jika grafiknya ini fungsi X, ya, maka integralnya luasnya adalah sama dengan integral dari A sampai B fungsi X dx ya. Atau kalau ditulis dalam bentuk limit seperti ini ya, sama saja. Baiklah ya, kita akan membahas PDF dan CDF ya untuk fungsi normal, dan kita demonstrasikan menggunakan Excel. Distribusi normal atau distribusi Gauss ya didefinisikan dengan fungsi ini ya. Kita sudah membicarakan dengan detail tentang hal itu saat kita mendiskusikan distribusi normal atau distribusi Gauss ya. Oke, ini mungkin kita ke Excel-nya. Nah, ini Excel-nya. Ini fungsinya ya untuk mengetahui saja. Ya, ini kita dulu sudah ya membuat Excel ini. Pertama kita buat X, sumbu X-nya increment 0 dengan increment 0,1 ya. Jadi lebarnya kalau ke grafik ini lebar delta X-nya adalah 0,1 ya dalam hal ini ya. Oke. Terus fungsi X-nya ya. Ini seper, ini pangkat min 1 di sini. Pangkat min 1 ini artinya seper ya. Berarti B2 adalah sigmanya ya kan, atau standar deviasinya. Ini rata-ratanya 10 dengan standar deviasi 1. Terus kemudian akar 2pi seper ya. Oke. Terus kemudian E pangkat ya, atau eksponen E pangkat sekian min A4 adalah X-nya ini ya. Kemudian dikurangi rata-rata B1 adalah mu kuadrat dibagi dengan 2 kalikan standar deviasi sigma kuadrat yaitu B2 ya. Ini kita kunci yang diperlukan ya, barisnya misalnya, atau kolomnya untuk X-nya, kemudian kita copy ke bawahnya. Maka semuanya akan memenuhi rumus ini ya. Oke, ini sudah saya rasa. Ini kita hapus dulu. Kemudian A increment adalah Y-nya dibagi 2 ya. B4 ditambah B5 dibagi 2. Ini mohon dilihat kembali ke sini. Ya, luasan kuning kotak ini adalah yang sebelah kiri. Ya, tingginya adalah tinggi rata-ratanya sebelah kanan dan sebelah kiri ya. Mungkin coba saya ya, ini adalah fungsi sebelah kiri. Nah, kok angel ya, agak sulit membuat garis yang tepat. Fungsi sebelah kiri ya, ini batas kanannya ya kan. Ya, ini adalah separuhnya, yang sini yang dipakai adalah separuh dari nilai yang sebelah kiri dan sebelah kanan ya. Dari A plus delta X, ini delta X kan. Oke, yang sebelah sini A plus delta X ya. Oke, jadi A dan A plus delta X, kemudian kita bagi 2 ya. Ini adalah A, fungsi A, ya, tingginya saat ditambah fungsi A plus delta X, kemudian kita bagi 2. Ya, tentu luasnya kotak adalah FA ditambah FA plus delta X bagi 2 dikalikan dengan lebarnya. Lebarnya adalah delta X ya dalam hal ini. Oke, maka ya, kita akan bisa mendapatkan A increment adalah luas kotak tadi ya, adalah tinggi rata-ratanya dikalikan lebarnya 0,1 ya. Oke, tentu saja luas totalnya ya dijumlahkan ya. Kalau yang sini adalah 1,4253 ditambah 3827 atau ini ditambah yang ini. Begitu seterusnya ya. Ini adalah A totalnya. Sehingga kita bisa mendapatkan grafik ini PDF-nya yang biru ya. Dan ini adalah CDF-nya ya. Dia akan meningkat dengan cepat begitu dekat dengan min-nya ya. Kemudian begitu jauh dengan min-nya atau sudah melebihi standar deviasinya agak jauh, maka dia akan konstan. Karena di sebelah kanan di sini mendekati 0 ya nilainya, demikian juga yang sebelah kiri. Begitulah ya bagaimana kita mendapatkan PDF dan CDF ya, yaitu menggunakan konsep integral, dan kita sudah mengoperasikannya di Excel seperti terlihat pada penjelasan di video ini ya. Oke. Oleh karena itu gambar ini menunjukkan distribusi normal dengan tinggi rata-rata 165 cm dari mahasiswa sarjana di Australia. Dan ini adalah grafik CDF-nya. Dan ini adalah PDF di distribusi normal, dan ini CDF dari distribusi normal ya. Kita belum ke distribusi Weibull ya. Oke. Bagaimana kita mendapatkan nilai PDF saat 165 kalau kita tahu CDF-nya ya. Ya. Maka caranya adalah dengan mencari gradiennya ini ya, gradiennya. Ya, kita misalnya saat 0,54 ya, nilainya saat 166 ya, 166 di sini nilainya ke sana adalah 0,54 ya. Kemudian kita turunkan 1 dari 165. 164 kita dapatkan nilainya adalah 0,46 ya. Maka ya gradiennya adalah delta Y. Delta Y tentu saja adalah 0,54 dikurangi 0,46 atau sama dengan 0,08. Kenaikannya delta Y-nya. Terus delta X-nya dari 164 ke 166 2 ya. Berarti tangennya ini gradiennya adalah 0,04 ya. Di sini 165 kemungkinan probability density-nya adalah 0,04 ya, sama dengan gradien dari kurva ya. Saya rasa ya itu kalau kita memahami kalkulus agak mudah ya. Jadi probability density itu biasa disebutkan fungsi X. Dalam hal ini fungsi X-nya adalah untuk distribusi normal adalah ini ya. Nah, kita dapatkan ini. Untuk mendapatkan PDF-nya biasanya disimbolkan dengan Fx huruf besar ya. Kita melakukan integral ya, integrasi ke sana, atau secara definisi adalah area to the left ya. Luas dari posisi yang ditinjau hingga batas kiri ya. Jadi misalnya contoh yang paling mudah ya, 165 ya, 165 kita tarik garis ke sini. Ya, ini adalah luasannya ya. Maka kalau dari sini 165, luasannya adalah separuh luasan total ya, atau 0,5. Ini luasannya, ya ini areanya ya. Area mulai dari yang paling kiri hingga ke titik yang ditinjau. Dalam hal ini kita mengasih contoh sama dengan min-nya itu ya. Areanya sampai ke situ adalah separuhnya ya. Dari kiri hingga 165 areanya adalah separuhnya. Kalau kita mencari nilai Fx kecilnya atau probability density-nya, ya kita dengan cara gradiennya ini tadi ya, sudah dijelaskan sebelumnya ya. Jadi kalau kita mencari CDF-nya, yaitu dengan menghitung luas di sini ya, kita akan dapatkan CDF-nya di situ. Kalau dari CDF kita pengen tahu probability density-nya atau nilai fungsi X, ya kita dengan gradiennya ya. Atau ya kalau mencari luas adalah kita mengintegralkan. Kalau kita mencari gradiennya, yaitu kita menurunkan atau mendiferensialkan ya. Begitulah ya tentang CDF dan PDF ya, dan kita memberi contoh untuk distribusi normal ya, karena distribusi normal pertama mudah dipahami, kedua kita sudah mempelajarinya tentang PDF dan CDF untuk distribusi normal. Salah satu gradien atau bahan untuk mempelajari Weibull distribution sudah selesai, yaitu tentang PDF dan CDF. Nah, kita berikutnya akan mempelajari tentang hazard rate ya, ingredient atau bahan yang kedua untuk memahami Weibull distribution. Untuk lebih memperjelas ya, penjelasan tentang PDF dan CDF ya, ini ada dua video aslinya ya, dari mana bahan ini disusun, bahan kuliah saya ini saya susun ya. Ini adalah yang video yang pertama adalah video oleh Philip Brockcomb ya, dia adalah senior engineering manager di program namanya SYNTA ya, SYNTA ya, di Portland, Oregon, United States ya. Portland itu kota pelabuhan di pantai timur ya dari Amerika ya, di sebelah utaranya New York ya, agak jauh sih. Terus kemudian yang berikutnya ya, video yang kedua ya masih tentang PDF dan CDF ya, oleh Justin Shelter ya. Dia mengembangkan, membuat channel namanya Z Statistik ya, karena namanya kan Justin Shelter ya. Jadi dia mengembangkan Z Statistik. Beliau adalah dosen di University of Sydney ya, di jurusan Sydney School of Public Health ya. Ini adalah video yang pertama ya, yang oleh Philip Brockcomb dari Portland, Oregon, United States.
Okay, so Ashish and I are here. We're going to do a little PDF, CDF explanations. We're going to use uniform random variables to explain it. This is kind of going to be a little excerpt video to understand how they work together. Because one really important thing to understand is the fact that we are using the same variable here, the same uniform random variable with the same numbers, everything is the same, but between the PDF and the CDF, we're just looking at the same random variable a little bit differently. So we're going to go through and show you how these work. So Ashish and I are going to start to show the area underneath, or in his case, the point on the line at which the probabilities would end up equaling each other. So if I want to say I want to find the probabilities for the space in here, let's say this is 2, and I move along this section, Ashish would then move along that line to that 2 area, and the point at that line would be this same. So if I continue to move my marker across this area, signifying where we are going in probabilities, Ashish's marker shows that the exact same point in probabilities along the CDF line. So if I want to say I want to find the probability between 5 and 7, Ashish is now doing the same thing on his. His will come across to this y-axis and be the difference between those, whereas mine is the area here. And that is essentially how they work. Would you like to add anything, Ashish?
Yeah, so what you want to keep in mind is, let's say, we know that the height of this area is going to be, it's a rectangle, right? So the area of this is 2 times 1 over 10. So this area is 0.2, right? So what that means is that the probability from 0 to 2, well, you don't want to look at area on this one. You only want to look at height.
I'll shift you a little bit.
Right here.
It's hard to see.
There you go. So the 0.2 height on the CDF refers to the 0.2 area on the PDF. And so if you did the same thing here, well, this area is the same area as this area right here. But these heights are a little bit different. The height here is going to be 7/10, so that's a 0.7. And the height here is going to be 0.5. So like he was saying, you take these two right here, right? Because if you remember, the CDF of 7 refers to the entire area from 7 all the way down. And the CDF of 5 refers to the entire area from 5 and all the way down.
Yep.
Right? So what you want to do is you want to take the 0.7 area and subtract away the 0.5 area to find the area in between. So basically what you're doing is you're taking this whole area, subtracting away this area here, and you're left with this area here, which is what you're looking for. 0.7 minus a 0.5.
Yep.
Oke, begitulah ya video dari Philip Brocombe ya. Berikutnya kita ikuti video tentang PDF dan CDF oleh Justin Zelter ya. Yang slide yang gambarnya banyak saya ambil dan saya jadikan dasar penjelasan sebelumnya, video saya sebelumnya.
Hi team, Justin Zeltzer here from zstatistics.com, coming at you today with a video on probability distribution functions. Now this video was actually requested by one Rabati Sanam, who I'm going to give a shout out to because I thought it was a great idea for a video. And as I do on this channel, I keep things very intuitive. I don't use a lot of formula, and it's something that's going to be hopefully useful for you to wrap your head around the concepts. So come along with me as we dive straight into probability distribution functions. Now, straight off the bat, I just need to get some terminology out of the way. Hopefully, if you're watching this video, you're familiar with the concept of discrete and continuous variables. If you're not, don't worry, we're going to deal with them individually in this video. But for discrete variables, they have this thing called a probability mass function, which is just a simple way of saying the probability of each discrete outcome. Now that's given the 3-letter acronym PMF that you might see around the place. And this compares to the PDF, or probability density function, which we use for continuous variables. But again, it's just like the probability of particular outcomes on a continuous distribution. But it's slightly different, so we're going to call it the probability density, and we'll see why that is a little bit later. Now be careful about PDF because I've called this whole video probability distribution functions. Now some people might call probability distribution functions, which relate to all of these together, as PDFs, which does get a bit confusing, doesn't it? But I use PDF to mean the probability density function, which relates solely to continuous variables. And I think most statistical resources will do exactly the same, but just be careful with the term PDF. Now, both discrete and continuous variables can construct what's called a cumulative function, and we'll see what these look like just in a second. But they use the common acronym CDF to mean cumulative distribution function. So let's dive into my first example, which is going to be a discrete variable. And this is one, again, that you might be able to intuit rather easily. Let's talk about a dice. Now, one dice has 6 possible outcomes, and each of those possible outcomes has the probability of 1/6. And we would call this distribution, we'd call this the probability mass function, just like we described on the previous slide. It's a discrete variable because it can only have outcomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can't roll a 2.5 or a 4.13. So this is a variable with discrete outcomes. In other words, a discrete variable. Now, I've written 1/6 here because we know there's 6 equally possible outcomes, but I might just use decimals here because it's going to help us a little bit later. So hopefully you're okay with me putting this at around 0.167 or so, which of course just represents 1/6. Now, what we can do is we can construct the cumulative probability, not just the probability, but the cumulative probability. But what does the word cumulative actually mean? Well, you can see that on this side we go from 0 to 1. So the scale is actually a little bit different to the scale on our original probability diagram over here. So what I might do just quickly is change the scale on this side so that it matches. So if we're looking at the cumulative probability diagram, let's just pick one of them, and let's just say we're looking at the height of the cumulative probability for outcome 4. Now, what the height of this represents is not the probability of rolling a 4, it's actually the probability of rolling a 4 or less. And the way we can describe that is by saying the probability of x being less than or equal to 4. So in other words, we have to sum up the probability of rolling a 1 plus the probability of rolling a 2 plus the probability of rolling a 3 and also 4. So what's essentially happening here is we're summing up all of the areas of 1, 2, 3, and 4 on this side. You can see if you kind of stack these little bars together, you'll get the height at 4. So quite clearly then, one of the properties of a cumulative distribution function is that the final bar needs to be 1. It needs to get to 1 by the end. Because don't forget, the probability of getting a 6 or less when you're rolling a dice has to be 100%, right? You can't roll a 7 on any dice I've seen. Okay, so I might just put this scale back to the original scale so we can have a little bit more ease at distinguishing things. But what I wanted to do is just muck with this a little bit so it's no longer just a perfect uniform distribution like it is here. So let's pretend now that the dice is rigged such that it can't roll 3s or 4s. In other words, the probability of rolling a 1, 2, 5, or 6 is 0.25, is 25% for each of those possible outcomes. Which sounds a bit silly, but I used to use a dice rolling app on my mobile. And I actually found out that the algorithm they were using was underrepresenting 3s and 4s in it. And boy did I write a sternly worded review on the iTunes store. But that's another story. What I want to look at here is how this represents changes now in the cumulative probability. So you can see that we actually get a nice flat gradient around 3 and 4 here because there is no 3 and 4 in the PMF. So the probability of getting 4 or less is kind of going to be the same as the probability of getting 2 or less. In fact, it's going to be exactly the same because there is no probability of 3 and 4 individually, right? So you can see that flatness here on the CDF indicates that there is no mass, if you want to call it that, in our probability mass function around 3 and 4. So that's going to come back to us when we start looking at continuous distributions. So we've pretty much dealt with the top half of this little flow diagram. And in this next section, we're going to have a look at continuous distributions. So let's jump straight into that and see how it differs. So my continuous distribution I'm going to use is the height of women. It's a classic example that everyone can kind of visualize, so it makes it pretty simple. And I've got my good friend Penny over here, who's telling us that indeed female heights might be distributed with a mean of 165. Let's say that's 165 centimeters is our mean. And it has some kind of standard deviation such that by about 140 centimeters, you're not getting too many women of that height, nor are you getting too many women up at 190 centimeters either. It's a completely theoretical distribution, but just one that I think is quite simple. Now, I'm hoping that you realize here that height is not a discrete distribution. In fact, it's a continuous distribution, because you can be 165.387 centimeters or 165.387684, etc., right? So it's a continuous variable. So we call the distribution here, the probability distribution, we call it a PDF, a probability density function. And if you're a little bit ahead of me, you might have a look at the probability on this side, which says 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, etc. And you might be asking, what do these numbers actually mean? What does it mean that this probability density at 165 at the mean is about 0.04? What does that mean? Is there a 4% chance of being 165 centimeters tall? Well, not quite. It's almost that. But we'll have a look at that in just a second, so hold that thought. But for the moment, let's just appreciate this nice bell curve shape, which we can call the probability density function. Now, if we're going to look at the cumulative probability, we can call it the CDF again, the cumulative distribution function. And much like in the discrete case, the axis here must go from 0 to 1. Anyway, this nice S-curve here, it's called an S-curve actually, is a very typical curve that you get from a normal PDF. Anything that looks bell-shaped in its probability density will look S-shaped in its cumulative probability. So what I'm going to try to do now is link the probability density function, the PDF, with the CDF and see if we can get from one to the other. So I'm going to start on this side and I'll select the mean value of 165. Now, because it's the mean, we know that the proportion of the distribution to the left of that mean is going to be 50%. So the yellow shaded region here is 50% of the whole distribution. And in fact, that's what's going to be represented on the CDF over here. At 165, it goes up to a value of 0.5. So this tells us that 50% or 0.5 of the distribution has elapsed at this point. Or if you want to use different terminology, you can say we've accumulated, cumulative, we've accumulated half of the distribution by the time we get to 165 centimeters. So then if we were to choose a point, say, before 165, maybe the point where there's only 25% in this left-hand region, and let's just say that that occurs where the height is 158 centimeters. So of course we can look at the CDF again, and we can see that 158 matches up with the value of 0.25. So in essence, these numbers here are telling us how much of the distribution is to the left of a given height. Okay, so that's how you can derive the cumulative probability from the probability density function. But can we go the other way? It's a little bit more involved, but follow me. We're going to zoom in now on the cumulative probability. So let's take 165 again, remembering that that's where we've accumulated half of the distribution. My question to you is, how much of the distribution is going to be around 165? And can we gauge that from our CDF, from this cumulative probability? Well, of course we can. And the way we do it is we look at the gradient of this line. Think about it. The higher the gradient, the more of the distribution that must be hovering around 165. If this was nice and flat, Remember what happened in our discrete example? When it was flat, it meant that none of the underlying distribution was around there. Remember, there was no 3s and 4s, and so our cumulative distribution for our discrete example was nice and flat at that point. You can see that the higher the gradient, the more of the distribution is going to be in that area. So let's find the gradient at 165. Now, for those of you with a background in calculus, you've got a way of doing this. But even for those that don't, I want to do it a simplified way so we get a real sense of what's going on. And if you go back to your year 9, year 10 mathematics, we know how to find a gradient, and all we need to do is construct a sort of little interval here around 165. And we're going to pick 2 points that are very close to 165, and let's choose 164 and 166. So if you go down just 1 centimeter here to 164, or up 1 centimeter to 166, you're going to get these 2 points here. And we know how to find a gradient between 2 points. It's the rise over the run. And you can see that the rise here is about 0.08. And these values have just been calculated using Excel, because Excel has a bunch of statistical functions. So I just found those out using Excel. And the run is going to be 2. So if you did this calculation, you get 0.04. So that's the approximate gradient at 165. And have a look at the PDF, you can see that it goes to 0.04. So this probability density, these values here, essentially represent the gradient of the CDF. In other words, you can see that the gradient peaks right in the middle of this CDF. The gradient is much smaller down this side, and also it's smaller up as you get closer to 180 and 190 centimeters. And that's reflected in the PDF. You can see that we have this crest at 165 centimeters. The crest tells us that the gradient is maximized at 165. So, there you go. To summarize then, we can get from the cumulative probability to the probability density function by calculating the gradient. So the gradient of the CDF is the PDF. And if we find the area to the left of a given point on the PDF, we'll get the value for the CDF. So they're very much related. Now, if you have done some calculus, you might be able to put this in terms of differentiating and integrating. And for those of you that are comfortable with that, I might just call here the PDF, I might call this lowercase fx for the sake of the formulas to come. And the cumulative probability, the CDF, is going to be capital F of x. And this is quite common terminology usage here, so you might see lowercase f's and uppercase f's. That's used quite a lot for PDF and CDF respectively. So for those people comfortable with calculus, you can see that the differential of the CDF is going to be equal to the PDF. So that's going this way, going from right to left. Alternatively, the integral of the PDF from negative infinity to x becomes the CDF. Now, I did think about actually providing some examples of this, but I thought that that would make the video too long, and there is a wealth of resources on the internet helping you differentiate and integrate functions. This video was just about the graphical representations themselves, and that brings us to the end. I hope you have enjoyed that and found that quite useful. I've got a whole bunch of videos now up on zstatistics.com. It pretty much covers first and almost parts of second year university, so check that out. I would recommend it. And please keep the suggestions coming. I really appreciate the feedback. Hit me up, subscribe to the channel, and do all those lovely things for me if you can. And I'll see you later.
Demikianlah ya penjelasan tentang PDF dan CDF ya. Ada sedikit catatan ya agar diklarifikasi ya. Kadang ada kebingungan ya tentang PDF ya. Karena kalau disingkat probability distribution function ini juga PDF kan. Sedangkan PDF yang dimaksud di sini adalah ya probability density function ya. Kalau yang PDF atau probability density function itu ya murni berkenaan ya, berhubungan dengan pembicaraan tentang continuous distribution ini ya. Tetapi kalau ini semua ya continuous distribution, discrete, kemudian kumulatifnya yaitu kita menyebutnya sebagai probability distribution function yang kalau disingkat juga PDF ya. Jadi kita harus mengklarifikasi diri kita sendiri bahwa PDF yang dimaksud adalah yang ini ya, probability density function, bukan probability distribution function. Kalau PDF yang distribution ini kalau disingkat juga PDF yang menyangkut tiga hal ini, PMF, PDF, dan CDF. Demikianlah ya, semoga sampai di sini penjelasan tentang probability distribution function ya bisa menjadi jelas bagi para mahasiswa. Setelah PDF dan CDF ya, maka kita akan belajar tentang hazard rate atau value rate ya nantinya ya, dan reliability. Oke, sekarang ini adalah hazard rate, itu didefinisikan sebagai jumlah komponen yang gagal ya dibanding dengan komponen yang survive. Ini lebih tepatnya dibanding waktu ya, waktu jumlah komponen gagal sebagai fungsi waktu total. Mungkin dengan memberikan contoh akan lebih mudah dipahami. Ya, misalnya katakanlah ada sebuah hotel atau bangunan memiliki 1.200 switch gitu ya jumlahnya. Ya, ada 4 switch atau 4 saklar ya rusak dalam waktu 3 bulan dari 1.200 saklar tersebut ya. Hazard rate per month ya, hazard rate per bulannya ya, maka adalah 4 yang rusak ya, waktunya adalah 3 bulan untuk 1.200 saklar ya. Maka hazard rate-nya 0,00111 ya. Lambangnya untuk hazard rate juga disimbolkan dengan lambda T. Ini sebenarnya sedikit berbeda ya. HT dan lambda T. Kalau lambda T itu adalah value rate. Nanti akan kita bicarakan. Berikutnya misalnya bulan apa ini? Next 2 month berarti setelah 3 bulan, bulan kelima ya berarti. Bulan kelima ada 6 lagi. Selain 4 tadi, ada 6 yang rusak lagi saklarnya. Ya. Perlu diingat yang 6 ini adalah bagian dari setelah rusak 1.196 ya. Karena tadinya kan 4 ya. 1.200 kurangi 4 berarti 1.196 ya. Ya, maka hazard rate-nya adalah bagian yang rusak ya, dibagi dengan ini rusak dalam 2 bulan ya, berarti 2 dikali 1196. 1196 ini adalah setelah dikurangi 4 yang pertama tadi. Oke. Begitu seterusnya ya, sehingga kalau dilengkapi ya ini adalah ini tadi bulan yang ketiga rusak 4, 2 bulan kemudian rusak 6, berarti 10 yang rusak. Ini bagian yang survive, ini adalah hazard rate-nya ya. Silahkan dicoba dihitung sendiri oleh mahasiswa. Ada juga Excel-nya di sini. Ya, ini adalah bulan ketiga ya, yang rusak 4. Ini intervalnya waktunya 3 berarti. Bulan kelima intervalnya adalah 2 ya kan. Yang rusak 6. Ini adalah bagian sisa yang survive ya. 1.200 dikurangi 4, 1196. Yang ini adalah jumlah yang rusak C2 ya, dibagi B3 ya, C3 dibagi B3 interval waktunya ya, B3 dikalikan, atau ini kalau saya bagi lagi dibagi dengan jumlah ya, jumlah yang survive. Ini sama saja kan, ini sama saja C3 dikalikan dalam kurung B3 kali D2, sama seperti sebelumnya. Kalau kita copy nanti dapat ini ya. Ya, dan itu adalah yang dipindahkan ke sini ya. Oke, silahkan dicoba sendiri. Nah, kita bisa juga membuat grafik hazard rate-nya ya, yang naik seperti ini. Ya, untuk kasus ini memang hazard rate-nya selalu naik ya. Untuk kasus yang dicontohkan, karena memang jumlah komponen rusak per bulannya selalu naik. Oke. Kemudian ini ada contoh ya. Ada 500 lampu ya, hingga 400 jam rusak 30 ya. Kemudian 50 jam kemudian ya, berarti pada waktu 450 rusak lagi 4 ya. Berapa reliability-nya ketika 400 ya. Dan hazard rate-nya pada saat 400 ya. Hazard rate sama seperti tadi menghitungnya ya. Tentu kita harus membuat Excel-nya ya. Hazard rate-nya Excel-nya mana? Oh, ini ya. Jadi kita membuat ketika 0, ketika 400 jam yang rusak 30 ya kan. Kemudian ketika 50 jam kemudian tambah yang rusak 4 ya. Tentu ketika 1000 ketika 400 ya, hazard rate-nya adalah 0. Ketika 0 hazard rate-nya ini ya, 0,015. Ketika 400 hazard rate-nya, ketika umur 400 nanti karena yang rusak saat 450 adalah 4 ya, berarti hazard rate-nya saat 400 adalah 0,0017 ya. Saat 0 hazard rate-nya 0,00015 ya. Sama dengan ini. Saat 0 bulan ke 0 hazard rate-nya adalah 0,00111 ya. Karena 3 bulan lagi dia akan rusak 4 gitu ya. Itu tentang hazard rate ya. Kemudian tentang ya, yang berikutnya reliability ya, saya rasa ini mudah. Reliability saat 400 dia akan rusak 30 ya dibagi 500 ya. Artinya yang rusak adalah berapa? 3 dibagi 30 dibagi 500 atau 60 dibagi 1000 atau 6 dibagi 100 ya, atau 0,006 ya. Reliability-nya 100% atau 1 dikurangi 0,006 ya. Atau 100 dikurangi 6% sama dengan 94% atau 0,94. Itu reliability-nya ya pada saat 400 jam. Oke, begitu kira-kira. Ya. Reliability adalah kemungkinan ya bahwa suatu produk akan bisa perform ya secara sukses pada waktu tertentu. Ini per definisi ya. Jadi semua komponen yang memiliki reliability. Oke, ini hampir mirip ya, dan sering bingung antara hazard rate dan failure rate ya. Itu hanya merupakan indeks reliability yang menyatakan laju kegagalan ya, laju kegagalan dari tiap komponen. Ini sebagai contoh ya, hampir sama kan definisinya, number of failure operating time ya, dibagi operating time total ya. Nanti dikenal MTTF dan MTBF. Bedanya kalau yang MTTF ini adalah untuk yang non-repairable. Jadi misalnya lampu tadi ya, mungkin tidak bisa diperbaiki, diganti saja, atau saklar dan sebagainya. Tapi kalau komponen-komponen mesin ya repairable ya, bisa di repair, yaitu mean time between failure ya, bedanya between ini MTBF. Kalau yang non repairable itu MTTF. Secara matematik MTTF itu kebalikannya dari failure rate ya. Ya kan? Yang tadinya pembilang di sini, number of failure menjadi penyebut. Yang tadinya penyebut di failure rate menjadi pembilang. Maka kita bisa mencari MTTF atau MTBF jika failure rate-nya tahu ya. Tinggal seper lambda saja, atau lambdanya failure rate, seper failure rate. Dan sebaliknya lambda juga seper MTTF atau seper MTBF gitu. Contoh ya, ini tentang failure rate, hampir mirip dengan hazard rate ya. Misalnya memiliki 1000 jam ya, kondisi normalnya ya, tapi 6 dari komponennya, tidak tahu ini apa, itu rusak ya, atau gagal. Pada yang 6 itu 550, 480, 680 jam, 790, 860, 620, 6 komponennya. Maka failure rate-nya adalah jumlah yang rusak, ya tentu dibagi total operation-nya ya, yang rusak ini kan pada 550, 480, 680, 790, 860, 620 jam ya. Jangan lupa total waktunya juga ada 14 unit ya, yang tidak rusak, dia beroperasi pada 1000 jam ya. Jadi failure rate-nya adalah 6 dibagi jumlahnya jam ini ya, sama dengan 17.980 ya. Atau bisa dihitung failure rate-nya adalah ini ya. Oke. Saya mencoba mencari-cari mana bedanya failure rate dan hazard rate ya. Dan berdasarkan dua contoh tadi ya, saya juga mencoba menghitung hazard rate-nya dan failure rate-nya ya. Bentar. Ya ini yang ternyata ya memang sedikit beda ya antara hazard rate dan failure rate. Mungkin akan sama untuk 3 bulan, tapi setelah itu dia berbeda harganya. Ya, ini menghitungnya berdasarkan contoh tadi ya. Yaitu pertama kita ketahui total jamnya ya, tentu 3.600 yang pertama, karena 3 dikalikan 1.200 selama 3 bulan ya kan. 3.600 bulan kalau dihitung. Ya, dari 1.200 komponen. Nah, total yang sini adalah tentu 3.600 ya. 3.600 ini F3 ditambah ya interval dikalikan yang survive ya adalah 1996 ya kan? Yang survive. Ya, ini kalau ini 1.200 kali 3 sedikit di atasnya gini ya. Ditambah waktu yang sebelumnya. Begitu seterusnya. Yang rusak ya bertambah dari 4 tambah 6 tambah 3 dan seterusnya. Maka failure rate-nya adalah 4 dibagi 3.600, 10 bagi 5.996 dan seterusnya. MTTF atau MTBF-nya ya seper failure rate-nya. Ini angkanya. Ya, begitu. Ya, mudah-mudahan ini membantu mengklarifikasi hazard rate, failure rate ya. Dan silahkan mahasiswa mengeksplor lagi apa bedanya hazard rate dan failure rate. Dari hitungan tadi ya tentang failure rate di sini ya atau angka ini tidak memiliki arti kalau kita membeli suatu mesin kemudian dikatakan failure rate per jamnya adalah angka ini, kita tidak memiliki bayangan ya. Oleh karena itu kalau kita bawa ke MTTF ya baik dengan menghitung langsung yaitu ini adalah total waktunya, kemudian ini total yang rusak, maka kita ketemu 2.996 jam ya MTTF-nya ya. Ini kan memiliki arti kalau begitu. Oh, mesin ini MTTF-nya hampir 3.000 jam ya. Atau kita bisa menghitung dengan seper lambda tentu saja. Hasilnya sama saja. Oke. Biasanya ya sebuah komponen mesin itu ya, memiliki bentuk seperti begini ya. Pada saat masih baru ya, belum settle begitu, maka dulu dikenal regen. Ya, maka failure rate-nya ini tinggi ya. Kemudian sering dimonitor ya dan dikontrol, diperbaiki bagian-bagian yang rusak sehingga dia nanti pada kondisi setimbang ya. Tetapi ada suatu saat di mana ya sudah terlalu tua ya dia akan naik lagi failure rate-nya. Maka ini bentuknya seperti bathtub ini ya. Maka dinamakan bathtub curve ya. Ini adalah kondisi awal, ini adalah useful life period ya. Biasanya yang dianalisa yang daerah yang ini ya, yang useful life period. Sering yang useful rate failure itu mengikuti kurva ini ya, kurva E pangkat min lambda T ya, reliability-nya ya, atau lambda adalah failure rate ya, failure rate-nya pada daerah yang konstan ini ya, dia akan mengikuti kurva eksponensial reliability-nya ya. Reliability tentu antara 0 sampai 1 ya. Dan ini jika MTBF dan MTTF divariasikan maka failure rate-nya juga bervariasi seperti ini bentuknya. Ya. Kita tentu dari MTBF, MTTF gitu, kita bisa mengetahui lambda ya atau failure rate ya karena sepernya kan. Ya. Lambdanya tahu, ya kurva E pangkat min lambda T kita tahu ya karena lambda didefinisikan dengan seper MTBF ya, seper theta. Ya. Sehingga ini untuk mesin dengan MTBF 500 dia akan cepat, ya, reliability-nya cepat turun seperti itu. Tidak demikian dengan mesin yang MTBF-nya lebih besar, ya, 5000, reliability-nya ya dia akan turun, tetapi tidak secepat yang MTBF-nya 500. Saya rasa begitu. Ya, ini adalah maksudnya, ya. Maka untuk mesin dengan rusak ini berapa? 1200, maka kita memiliki mesin rusak di atas 1200, kita memiliki reliability atau kehandalan 0,6699 atau 66,99%, ya. Kalau kita menentukan 1200-nya jam operasinya, ya, maka kita memiliki kehandalan 66,99%, ya, atau 67%. Begitu artinya. Ada dua video, ya, yang membicarakan tentang hazard rate maupun failure rate, ya. Dua-duanya dari ASQ, American Society for Quality. Ini yang pertama oleh Heman Urduares, ya. ASQ, American Society for Quality atau standar kualitas, itu ada di Milwaukee, Wisconsin, ya, di tepi danau Michigan, ya. Agak ke tengah, tidak ke pantai yang sebelah timur. Sebagian besar kota di Amerika kan di pantai sebelah timur, ya. Ini juga bagian dari ASQ, American Society for Quality, ya, tetapi yang bagian sertifikasi, ya, atau CQE, Certified Quality Engineer, ya. Kalau engineer pengen mendapatkan sertifikat sebagai quality engineer, ya, ini tesnya di akan dapat sertifikat CQE, Certified Quality Engineer, ya. Ya, itu bagian pekerjaan dari ASQ tadi, American Society for Quality, ya. Ini oleh salah satu bagian sertifikasi orang-orang di situ, yaitu Andy Robertson, ya. Silakan diikuti dua video ini. Mudah-mudahan dua video itu membantu pemahaman akan hazard rate, kemudian failure rate, kemudian kurva eksponensial, ya. Yang dengan dua hal itu kita nanti akan mencoba memahami tentang Weibull distribution. Baiklah, ya, kita ikuti video oleh Heman Urduares, ya. Bisa diikuti di alamat link ini, ya, aslinya, tapi bisa juga kita dengarkan di slide ini.
Welcome to Institute of Quality and Reliability. Hi, this is Hemant. In this video, we will explain the concept of hazard rate with a simple example. We will also explain the mathematical relationships of hazard rate in exponential and Weibull distributions. The hazard rate. Instantaneous hazard rate can be considered as how fast the components fail as a proportion of the surviving components. Mathematically, hazard rate h of t is equal to f of t upon r of t, where f of t is the probability density function at time t and r of t is the reliability function at time t. Let us consider a simple example. Consider a building which has got 1200 electric switches. Suppose 4 switches fail in 3 months out of 1200. Thus the hazard rate per month per unit will be given by h of t equal to 4 divided by 3 into 1200, and that equals 0.001111. Note, hazard rate is often denoted as lambda t instead of h of t. Let us continue with the same example. Suppose in the next 2 months, 6 more switches fail. Remember, these are out of 1196, as 4 had failed within the first 3 months. Thus, the hazard rate during this period will be given by h of t equal to 6 upon 2 into 1196, that equals 0.002508. After collecting more data till 10 months, we can estimate the hazard rate for every month as shown in the following table. We have already collected data till 5 months. So further from 6 to 10 months, this is the data collected, and based on the data, we can estimate the hazard rate for each month. It is shown in the table. Let us represent the hazard rate graphically. From start to first 3 months, then 3 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, and 7 to 8, 8 to 9, and 9 to 10. If you wish, you can pause the video and try this exercise. 500 bulbs are under test. Till 400 hours, 30 bulbs have failed. In the next 50 hours, 4 more bulbs fail. What is the reliability at 400 hours? What is the instantaneous hazard rate at 400 hours? Instantaneous hazard function is conditional probability of failure per unit time between time t and t plus delta t, given that the item has survived till time t. Mathematically, instantaneous hazard rate or hazard function h of t is given by f of t upon r of t, where f of t is the probability density function at time t and r of t is the reliability function at time t. Now let us understand hazard function for exponential distribution. The probability density function for exponential distribution is given by f of t equal to lambda e to the power minus lambda t, and the reliability function is given by e to the power minus lambda t. Therefore, h of t is equal to f of t upon r of t, and the e to the power minus lambda t will get cancelled, resulting into lambda as the hazard rate, which is a constant hazard rate for exponential distribution. But what do we mean by constant hazard rate? It means that proportion of items failing in equal time intervals would be same. Let us consider an example. Suppose a company has shipped 5,000 power supply units for laptop computers. Out of this, 1% unit, that is 50 units, fail in 1 month. If the hazard rate is constant, then out of the surviving 4950 units, 1% units, that is 49 units, will fail during the second month. A table of failures with constant 1% hazard rate is shown in the video here. Now let us look at this table. The first column of the table shows time in months from 1 to 60. The second column shows number of items at the start of the time interval. The failed quantity shows number of items failed during the interval. NE shows number of items surviving at the end of the interval, which is difference between NS and failed quantity. And H of t is the hazard rate, which is 1%, which is constant throughout. So during the first month 50 failed, so 4950 survived. Out of this 4950, another 1%, that is 49 failed, so 4901 survived. Out of this 4901, again 1% failed, and so on. If we look at the graph of this number of surviving items, it looks like this. The x-axis is time in months and the y-axis is number of items surviving. This is typical of the constant hazard rate behavior.
Oke, begitulah ya tentang hazard rate ya. Dan untuk grafik untuk hazard rate konstan yang akhirnya nanti mengikuti pola eksponensial itu ya. Grafiknya dari hazard rate-nya. Kita lihat video berikutnya ya oleh Andy Robertson ya yang akan membicarakan value rate, lebih ke value rate, kemudian juga ke reliability dan mungkin juga ke grafik dengan fungsi eksponensial ya.
Hey guys, Andy Robertson here with CQ Academy, and I'm back with another video to help you prepare for the CQ exam, where we're talking about reliability. Now, in terms of the CQ exam, reliability is one of the most important topics on the exam, and I think it has more questions than any other topic in the body of knowledge. So this is a really important lecture. Now, we're not going to cover the entire reliability section today. We're going to talk about two things: reliability indices and reliability models. All right, so let's head over to the computer and get started.
All right, let's take a quick look at today's agenda. I want to start over here on the left with the CQE body of knowledge. So no matter what exam you're studying for, reliability engineering or quality engineering, whatever, they have similar bodies of knowledge. But here in the CQE body of knowledge, we want to talk about reliability and maintainability indices, mean time to failure, mean time between failure, and we'll start the presentation off with that. So we're going to start with failure rate, mean time to failure, those sorts of things. And then we're going to get into reliability models, things like the bathtub curve, the exponential distribution, and the Weibull distribution. By the way, we'll save things like here, the maintenance tools, and you'll also see like hazard tools like FMEA. We'll cover that in a different video, but today we're just going to focus on these indices and the reliability models. Okay, so I want to start with just a basic definition of reliability, right? You're watching this video, so you have some understanding of it, but essentially the formal definition is that reliability is the probability that a product will perform successfully under specific conditions for a given period of time. The key phrase here is a given period of time. You know, reliability, the way I like to explain this is that reliability is quality over time, right? We build these products, we make these products, we use these products, and we expect that they're able to perform at a certain level over a given period of time. And so that's how I want you to think about reliability, because there's very much a relationship between reliability and time, right? We expect high quality over time. All right, so let's get into those reliability indices. The first one I want to talk about is called the failure rate. This is the most basic reliability index, and it simply describes the rate at which your product fails over time. And I've included a bunch of pictures here, right? Light bulbs fail, lawnmowers can be used for a particular period of time and then they fail. And that's essentially the failure rate. And so oftentimes we like to talk about the rate at which a product fails over time. Now, the more meaningful metric that you'll hear most often is something like mean time to failure. Now, I want to explain this to you because this is a reliability index for non-repairable units. Now, I want to make a huge distinction here because there are products that we make, and this light bulb is the perfect example. We make it, we start using it, we expect it to work properly for, let's say, 10,000 hours, and then when it breaks, we have no plans on repairing it. We're just going to throw it out. We're not going to fix it. We use the light bulb, and then we're going to throw it out. There are a ton of items out there that we produce and that we use that are considered non-repairable units, right? This AC motor, this light bulb. And when we're using a non-repairable unit, we always talk about this reliability indice called the mean time to failure, right? It's what is that average length of time until that product fails. Now, the inverse of that is called the mean time between failures. So when we're talking about the reliability of a repairable unit, we want to talk about a metric where we start using it and then we use it for a period of time and then it breaks and then we fix it and we start using it again, right? So things like common appliances, automobiles, lawnmowers, airplanes, these items all are repairable. And so when we're talking about a repairable item, in your head, if you produce a repairable item, the metric that you're going to use is mean time between failure. In fact, and I'll show you this on a future slide, but these two indices are identical to each other in every single way, except for this one distinction between non-repairable and repairable units. So in your mind, I want you to think of these two indices as very much identical. And again, that only difference is repairable and non-repairable units. And before I give you an example, I want you to know we're going to work an example from both these indices so you can see how they're calculated. I want to start by showing you the equations that we use for all three of these so that you understand the relationship. So when we're talking about the failure rate up here, we calculate that as the number of failures divided by a certain period of time, right? And you'll kind of see that this is generally reported as failures per hour, okay? This is the rate at which your product fails over time per hour. Now, this isn't a very meaningful metric because our customers never really talk about our products in terms of the failure rate. If I'm the customer and I'm describing my refrigerator or my automobile or some other repairable unit, I'm going to describe that in the form of time, right? I want to buy my fridge and I want it to work for 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. I'm going to give you a unit of time that I expect the product should be able to last before it breaks. And that is the mean time to failure or the mean time between failure. Now, the reason I wanted to show you these equations here is because I want you to see the variables, right? Essentially, this equation is simply just inverted. When we're calculating the mean time to failure or the mean time between failure, we're simply just taking the inverse of the failure rate, and it reflects the amount of time that passes before we have a failure on average. Now, you'll also notice that we use the same Greek letter here, theta, to represent mean time to failure and mean time between failure, and that is absolutely on purpose. Remember, these two indices, these two indexes, are identical in every single way, except that mean time to failure is non-repairable units, and mean time between failure is talking about a unit that is repairable. And then I just want to kind of summarize this slide by showing this relationship. The failure rate, which is lambda, is the inverse of theta. It's the inverse of mean time to failure, and vice versa, right? Our mean time between failure or our mean time to failure is simply just the inverse of the failure rate. So that's the relationship between these two indexes. By the way, before we move on, I know I've thrown a lot of equations at you. This presentation will have a lot of equations, and I want to give you a cheat sheet that you can use on the CQ exam. Just head over to cqacademy.com/free cheat sheet. It's got all these reliability equations, and I'll give you a practice exam for reliability specifically to help you use these equations, help you practice and prepare for the CQ exam. All right, let's keep going. All right, now let's do an example of a failure rate. So let's say we have 20 units and we put them on test. We start running them at their normal operating condition and we run all 20 units for 1,000 hours. In that time period, 6 of those units fail at the following hours, right? You can see those hours here. What is the failure rate of the product? Now we can use our equation here. So let's see what we've got. The failure rate lambda is equal to the number of failures. Now remember, we had 6 out of the 20 units fail, so we had 6 failures. And then in the denominator here, we have the operating time. So for those 6 units that failed, we can simply just take those data points right out of the problem statement and put them in here. Now, the other thing you have to consider, and this is the biggest mistake people make when they calculate the failure rate, is they don't account for the time associated with the products that didn't fail. So we had 14 units that made it the full 1,000 hours of testing. And we obviously need to account for that time in the denominator here to get an accurate prediction of our failure rate. And so we can take that 6 divided by the 17,980, and we can talk about our failure rate as 0.000334 failures per hour. Now, I want you to kind of look at that number and think about what it means, because it's nearly meaningless, right? It's hard to contextualize that result. Like, what does that even mean? Is that a good number? Is that a bad number? How does that relate back to the customer's needs for our products? And that's the specific reason, right? The answer to that question is the reason why we generally talk about reliability in terms of the mean time to failure or the mean time between failure. And so on this slide, all I'm really showing again is that inverse relationship between the failure rate and the theta value, that mean time to failure, the mean time between failure. And we can take this exact same example and we can essentially use this equation to calculate the mean time to failure for our product. So again, we have 20 units, we put them on test, we run them at their normal operating conditions for that full 1,000 hours. Remember, we have 6 units fail, and then here are those time marks, those time values. And we can simply plug in this equation for theta, right? So the mean time to failure, let's say it's a non-repairable unit. So the mean time to failure, we've got the time values. So here are those 6 different time values, plus the 14,000 hours for the 14 units that all passed, divided by 6. And this is a much more meaningful answer. Look at this. Our mean time to failure is 2,996 hours to failure. Now, let's say we're talking about, I don't know, a motor or some other device that we've made. If our customer has told us that, the motor really has to be able to last for 1,000 hours, well, we're good here. The data seems to indicate that our product, meets their reliability needs. If they come back to us and say, no, the product needs to last at least 10,000 hours, well, then maybe we don't have the reliability that the customer needs. So that's the beauty of mean time to failure and mean time between failure, is that those reliability indices really reflect kind of the customer need for our product. The other way we could have calculated this is by simply taking the failure rate from the previous slide, taking the inverse of that failure rate, and we'd come out to the exact same number. Okay, so now we're on to kind of the second part of the presentation, which is all about those reliability models. And so the first model that we absolutely have to talk about is the bathtub curve. It's not a model that we use to actually make reliability predictions. It's a model of the reliability of a unit, of a general device or a general product over time. And the general concept is that when we launch a new piece of equipment, let's say we're talking about either production equipment or even a product, right? When we launch that new product or we first produce a product, sometimes there can be it's an early failure period, right? An early life period where our failure rate is high, but then as time progresses, we work out some of those kinks. Maybe it's manufacturing issues, assembly problems, defective parts or assembly steps that weren't performed correctly. Oftentimes when we first launch a new device or a new automobile, maybe we had this early failure period here that we have to work through. A lot of companies perform like a burn-in, whether it's an automotive company who runs a car for 10 miles or 20 miles or 30 miles, just to work out all those early kinks and detect any early failures in the process. But then eventually, most systems achieve this equilibrium period that's called the useful life period. This is where we want to operate. This is where we want our product to be operating in this useful life period. And you'll notice here that the failure rate in the useful life period is constant, right? And by the way, that's lambda. We were talking about that reliability indice of the failure rate. That's what we're modeling here, is the failure rate lambda over time. So that's a key characteristic of the bathtub curve, that in the useful life period, the failure rate is constant. And when the failure rate is constant, we can use the exponential distribution to make reliability predictions for our products or for our equipment. So let's look at that now. Let's switch gears now and talk about, okay, we're in the useful life period, our failure rate is constant. How do we make reliability predictions using the exponential distribution? And so let's say we're testing motors, right? And we're making this AC motor. And let's say we have 3 different designs and we've put them all on test and we've calculated 3 different mean time between failure values. The first is 500 hours in green, and you can see how the reliability, right, really kind of tanks really quickly here when we have a poor mean time between failure. The other designs performed much better, right? We've got a mean time between failure of 2,500 hours and a mean time between failure of 5,000 hours. And you can see how this plot of reliability is substantially better over time when that mean time to failure is longer. The y-axis here of this reliability curve is probability, right? It's the probability that your product is successfully performing at that stated instance in time, right? So for example, for this curve here in blue, right here at around 3,500 hours, there's a 50-50 shot of our product failing or performing successfully. And then, by the way, here is the actual equation that we use to calculate reliability using the exponential distribution. And you'll notice there's one parameter here. The reliability distribution is fully characterized by a single parameter, and that's lambda. So we talked about the failure rate. Lambda is really important for the exponential distribution. And then again, remember, that's simply just 1 over theta. So if you're making a reliability prediction and somebody gives you the mean time to failure or the mean time between failure, you can always convert that into lambda. All right, let's do an example real quick. So you've tested 20 units and you found that your mean time between failure is 2,996 hours. What is the reliability of our product at 1,200 hours of operation? So here's a reliability curve of a product that is exponentially distributed, right? We're in that useful life region. And our mean time to failure or mean time between failure is 2,996 hours. Here is how we calculate reliability. So remember, reliability is a function of time. It's e raised to the negative lambda t, where again, remember, lambda is just that failure rate. And now we can simply plug in what we know. So we know we're solving for reliability at 1,200 hours, right? So our t value is 1,200 hours. And then our theta value, this, right, you can see theta here in the denominator, is simply 2,996. And when we work out this equation, it comes out to 0.6699. So the question is, how do you interpret that result? Now, if you come over here to the actual reliability graph and you find 1,200 hours here on the x-axis, right, because this is time, you find 1,200 hours and you come across and you go, that looks about right. You know, we have about a 66, 67% reliability at that stated instance in time. Now, you can interpret this two ways. If you think about it as a single unit, the probability that that single unit successfully performs past the 1,200 hour mark is 66%, right? Just one unit, the probability of operating past 1,200 hours is 66%. If you talk about it as a population, right? Let's say you made 1,000 motors or 1,000,000 motors. At the 1,200 hour mark, 66% of your units would still be operational. 66% of your units would still be reliable at 1,200 hours. And the other 33, 34% of your units or of your product would have failed by that point in time. Make sense?
Demikianlah ya. Dengan video ini mudah-mudahan mahasiswa ada sedikit pemahaman tentang PDF dan CDF, yaitu probability density function dan cumulative distribution function ya. Kemudian tentang hazard rate dan ataupun failure rate lambda, serta MTTF ya dan MBTF ya. MTTF itu untuk yang non repairable ya. Mean time to failure, ini mungkin mean time between failure, salah nulisnya ini, MTBF ya. Terus kemudian memahami tentang reliability, terus bahwa sesungguhnya semua komponen mesin itu mengikuti Betapp curve ya untuk reliability-nya. Nah, untuk yang useful life dari Betapp curve itu, maka kita bisa menyatakan dalam exponential distribution.